And we are live. Welcome to another edition of DT Live. Hope everybody's doing all right. This is a rather impromptu stream. I really didn't have anything planned for the day. Well, let me mute the stream here. So, since it's an impromptu stream, no one really got a notification. It's going to take people a little while to get here. I don't know how long I'm going to stream this evening. I actually haven't really had time to do any content today or yesterday, so I don't have anything planned. I thought we'd do something live, though. It's fun interacting with you guys in the YouTube chat. You guys typically have great questions and comments. We already have Nosy in the chat. Hey DT, it's night here, 2:30 here, 2:30 a.m. Oh. Well, I hate to keep you up, but you can always catch it on the replay if you need to. By the way, let me know how the audio is. Also, let me know how the stream is doing as far as buffering, because the reason I'm doing this stream, like I said, I had no content planned for today. I was actually just taking a day off. I needed to take a couple days off. I've kind of worked myself to death here lately, and you got too many other things in life going on that I need to take care of, so I had to step away from the computer the last couple of days. But I needed to do a test stream mainly. I just wanted to see if we were still having networking issues, because I did a distro hop a couple of weeks ago, and the day after the distro hop, I tried to live stream, and it was horrible. The live stream was completely horrible, buffering like crazy, and it was completely unwatchable, and I wasn't sure if it was the computer after the distro hop or if it was just networking issues. But looking at it right now, I'm looking at the preview in OBS. I'm also looking at the preview window in YouTube. Everything looks all right. So I think it was just Comcast that day. You know, I have Comcast, unfortunately, and they're horrible. Their internet service is horrible. And for a couple of days there, it was practically unusable. The upload speeds were so bad, there's no way you could stream. And today it's all right. At least it seems to be passable. But those of you that have Comcast or Xfinity here in the U.S., talk about a craptastic cable company. They are just horrible. But you know, it's a monopoly. You really don't have any alternatives. I mean, what's your alternatives for cable and internet? You know, you could go with one of the satellite providers, but that's not going to work for something like this. You know, you're just going to lose internet every time the weather's bad if you go satellite. No. Yeah, Sudo Reboot is in the chat. How you doing, sir? Long time no see. Yeah, and Leviticus says, "What's up, dude?" Steven, Ramon, Edward, how you guys doing? Cider Master. Yeah, we'll see a lot of familiar faces. Yeah, so this, again, the stream was not planned in any way. I just decided about 10 minutes ago to do a stream because I actually haven't been home all day. I had no content planned. I actually didn't plan on making a video at all today because I knew there was no way for me to actually figure out something to make and then sit down and record something, edit it. You know, it takes several hours to do that. So, you know, I got home and I was like, you know what? I really didn't make a video yesterday, and I don't think I'm going to do anything tomorrow. I'm going to probably record the next edition of Unfettered Freedom, the podcast, tomorrow, and it'll be released late tomorrow night into Thursday. So I was like, well, if I don't do anything today, you know, I'm not going to make any content for 3 days straight. That's very unusual for me, right? I make a lot of content. And I was like, well, you know what? Why don't we just sneak a live stream in? Because these are always fun. A lot of you guys ask me to do more stuff live, and I don't like live. It's because it's so unpredictable. You never know how the networking is going to go. You know, if you have internet problems, it's going to suck bad. Also, you always have to deal with things like potentially a loss of power. You know, when the weather's bad. Right now, it's raining here. So, and it's going to get worse later in the week with the hurricane. So, hey DT, do you use any visual file manager to have something to click sometimes? I have several file managers on the system. Since, again, we not really have anything planned, file managers that I have on the system. I mean, do I have PCMan FM installed? Oh, I guess I didn't install PCMan FM when I reinstalled the other day. Thunar is installed by default on Arco Linux, so there is Thunar if you really wanted a graphical file manager. My terminal-based file manager of choice is VIFM. You guys know VIFM, really cool file manager here, based in the terminal, of course. It's a TUI file manager. If I really wanted something else, I mean, I could always use Emacs as a file manager. So that's Doom Emacs. That is Dear Ed. Doom Emacs, and it works too. I mean, it works just fine. If I wanted to, I could basically do the same thing I just did in VIFM. I could go to my wallpapers directory, and if I wanted to, I could turn on the image previews. And, well, I say I could turn on the image previews. Did I not? Well, I lied there. What is the key binding for my image previews? See, some of this stuff is still not set up since the distro hop. Let me go to my config.org, my config file for Doom Emacs, and what I need to do is find the section for Dear Ed, because I think I have a Dear Ed section somewhere in here where I've got some stuff. File manager, Dear Ed, Control X I. Well, let's try that again. So let me go into Dear Ed. And let me go into a directory with images. The wallpaper directory makes the most sense. And Control X I. This buffer is read only. And, you know, I'm not getting image previews. The images themselves work when I click on it. I'm not sure why that's not working. It's using a module called Peep Dear Ed. Maybe I don't have that installed. See, this is the stuff that we can do live. Peep Dear Ed. Maybe I just didn't have it turned on. Now that I've toggled it on, let me go back. Peep Dear Ed. Yeah, now we have the image previews. Right. All right. Anyway, file managers. So I've got several file managers. I can use VIFM. I can use Dear Ed in Emacs. I could use PCman FM, I could use Thunar, but typically what I use is the terminal. I do almost everything I need to do as far as file management in the terminal. So, there's really no reason not to. It's so much easier just to open up a terminal, CD, wherever it is you need to go. If you need to copy, move, delete, whatever it is you need to do to a file, make simple edits, just do it all in the terminal. You know, if you're doing really complicated stuff, you know, moving, you know, bunches of files at a time, or maybe editing bunches of files at a time, then something like VIFM makes a lot of sense because you can just enter visual mode in VIFM, and, you know, then it basically throws you into a Vim buffer and you do all your edits and then escape out of that, and makes bulk renaming, you know, a lot easier in something like VIFM than using the command line, of course. All right, so got sidetracked there trying to figure out what was going on with my image previews in Emacs. Sorry, guys. Oh, a stream. Yeah, I know. It's unusual for me, right? MK, love your channel. Thank you, MK. Appreciate that. Yeah, good question. LOL. Yeah, the file manager question. A lot of people do ask, hey, what programs do you use? Because I do so much on the channel showing you guys a ton of different programs. You know, so I've shown you guys a million different terminal emulators. So I always get, hey, DT, what's the one you really use? Or, hey, I've shown you guys so many web browsers. Hey, DT, what's the one you really use? And honestly, I use a lot of them. Like, I use multiples. That's why I have so much stuff installed. Even now, I still get the question, hey, are you really an Emacs user? Or are you really a Vim user? Because I open up both Vim and Emacs in my videos. You never know what I'm going to open, and I'm comfortable in both. It doesn't really matter. All right. Speaking of web browsers, you know, because I haven't done much on this lately, but you guys know Qt Browser. Qt Browser is probably one of the coolest browsers out there as far as something that's keyboard driven. And, you know, just a really nice browser. I could comfortably use Qt Browser as my daily driver if I really wanted to. It's actually kind of comfy. You know, it's got the hints here. You know, you just hit F on the keyboard and it gives you these hints as far as, you know, if I type A on the keyboard right now, it's going to go to that first link, which is distrotube.com. I just hit A on the keyboard. It should launch. It did. It launched it in a another tab. I've got those links set up to open in new tabs. Same thing here. I'm on distrotube.com, the home page. If I hit F, I'll get more links. If I do LD, that should go to the videos tab. And then I could do F again, and I could do, I don't know, KJ. Go to that link, which is how to make your tiling window manager look amazing. That particular video I did the other day, although it didn't go to it. I think the link I really need is not the KJ one, which is the image. I need the link right here, which is LJ. That's the one I want. All right. Anyway, you can just navigate with the keyboard. You can go back. Well, I'm doing Shift H to go back. And of course, Super Shift C and XMonad just to kill that window. So a little bit of Qt Browser. Those of you that haven't seen the video I did on Qt Browser is about 6 months ago. I did a brief introductory video on how to get started with Qt Browser. It's a pretty sweet browser, actually. It is Chromium based, unfortunately. So, there's just not any non-Chromium based browsers out there that are worth using. You just Mozilla Firefox. I mean, that's the one we all need to get behind. Mozilla Firefox. We can't let that die, because they are all that's standing between Google and total world domination when it comes to the World Wide Web. So we gotta have Firefox survive. I know some people are going to say, well, there's some WebKit browsers out there. You got, Surf and some other stuff out there. I do have my build of Surf on the system too. If I launch Surf, of course, it's not going to open anything. I think I had a hotkey for it to open, but I'm not sure what that is in XMonad. It's been a while since I've run Surf. There it is. It looks like I had it bind to Alt, Super, and B for browser. So that is the Surf browser there. Surf's pretty cool, suckless. Of course, I have Firefox also installed. Have Brave also installed. I think I have Bad Wolf also installed, since I did a recent video about it. Briefly took a look at things like VimB, which is okay. It's kind of like Qt Browser, but I think Qt Browser is much more mature project. Min, I very briefly took a look at the Min browser. I really didn't make a video about it. I just mentioned it and opened it a couple of times on camera, but I never went into any real detail with Min. There's a bunch of alternative browsers out there if you're looking for some, off the beaten path stuff. Obviously, I'm never going to use a proprietary web browser, so I don't care about Chrome and Vivaldi. I'm not going to use them. Microsoft Edge is going to come to Linux soon. I don't care about that. I won't be installing Microsoft Edge. Yeah, Lynx is the best browser. Lynx is not bad. And that is another one I do have installed. I could open up Lynx. So if I wanted to, I could go to distrotube.com, which I think I was already there. Distrotube.com is a directory on my system, so I actually have to do the full path. So https://distrotube.com. Otherwise, it's just going to open the directory on my system, because I have a folder in my home directory called distrotube.com. It holds the source code to my website, the Hugo website, the static generated site. Anyway, where else could we go here in links? You know what? Let's check out distrowatch.com. See how that looks in a terminal-based browser. And it's taking a minute to load. Lynx is not the fastest browser, which is strange because, you're like, well, it's in the terminal. It doesn't have to load images, multimedia, and all that stuff. Yeah, but there's some other stuff involved with loading a web page. And it does seem like, Lynx is just slow. Anyway, DistroWatch looks really good, actually, in Lynx. Some websites look kind of garbage in Lynx because they are set up in such a way with the tables and the columns and the formatting, and not every website looks good when it's rendered as plain text, but DistroWatch doesn't look too bad. All right, let's get back to the chat here. Got sidetracked with some web browser stuff too. Vivaldi may not be garbage, but is proprietary. If it's proprietary, it's garbage to me. And I get these questions all the time. Hey, why do you call proprietary stuff garbage when you don't use it? But when you use it, you don't call it garbage. Like somebody asked me that the other day because I said, something about the podcast. I was uploading the podcast because you really have to be on iTunes. If you have a podcast, it's got to be listed on iTunes because so many services basically just go grab it from iTunes. Got to be on iTunes, and then I mentioned I'm also going to put it on Spotify, and I said Spotify's proprietary garbage. And somebody was like, how are you going to say iTunes is proprietary garbage and Spotify's proprietary garbage? A couple videos back, you said you had a Netflix account and watched Netflix. I do. And Netflix is proprietary garbage. What does that have to do with me having a Netflix account? Me having a Netflix account and needing to watch Netflix doesn't negate the fact that it's proprietary. It's full of DRM, and it's garbage. I mean, like, you people have, some of you guys have a disconnect here. Like, if I use something, it can't be garbage. We all use stuff that we know is garbage. How many of you guys right now have a Facebook account or a Twitter account? And you know it's garbage. I don't have to tell you guys. You know deep down, you know you shouldn't be on those platforms. But if I called it proprietary garbage, some of you would get mad because you're like, well, if I have to use Facebook and he says it's proprietary garbage, I think DT's secretly calling me garbage. No, I'm not. It's not personal. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with people that use the software. When I say a piece of proprietary software is proprietary garbage, it has absolutely nothing to do with the people that use the software. It has to do with the software itself. And really, the only persons that should take that personally, maybe the developers of the software. But unless you're developing that software, yeah, it's not about you. Yates, thanks for the super chat. He says, you make me want to compute like it's 1988. No, this is much more advanced than what we had in 1988. This is, people see the tiling window manager and the terminal, and they think it's like old school stuff. But I mean, this is really, really advanced sci-fi futuristic stuff compared to something that we had in the 80s or the 90s. DT, why do you like XMonad? Because it rocks. I mean, why? Because it's awesome. It's a dynamic tiling window manager. I like dynamic tiling window managers, and by that I mean dynamic. So, it's got these preset layouts. So if I just start opening stuff, standard, mastered, and stack layout. So if I wanted to change layouts, I could. I mean, I could go into this layout here, which is the magnified layout, which is really neat. You see this window that has focus? It's magnified. It kind of jumps out of the layout, right? It's kind of neat. I'm not sure what other ones I have. Full or monocle, and then of course a floating layout. And then I have a tabbed layout. I keep this in my config. I don't really use this tabbed layout, but so many people ask for tabs in their tiling window manager. I figured I'd add it to my config for those that go and grab my config. Anyway, it's really fast and light, and the config file is really neat to play with once you learn a little Haskell. And there's so many cool extra modules like this command launcher that I just, at the top of the screen, you see the run prompt. That is not dmenu. That is not Rofi. That is actually a Haskell module. So I could actually, run stuff from that. I also have the cool, tree menu plugin installed, so I could, navigate through this and open programs. Or I also have the bookmark section where I could go find a bookmark and I could hit enter, and that bookmark is actually going to launch in Qt browser. There's a lot of really neat stuff to XMonad. That's such a deep question. Why do you like XMonad? I could talk for hours about why I like XMonad. All right. I know I missed a bunch of chat. We've got about 300 people watching the stream, so I do apologize. If you ask a question, chances are I'm not going to see it. If it's a super chat, I will try to get to it unless we get, a bunch of super chats back to back. Sometimes I miss those too. But luckily with those there is a permanent record of them. So even if I miss it on stream, I can go back in the YouTube dashboard and I will still see your question if it's a super chat. And if I have to, I'll get to it, on camera or something later. Let's see. FreeDOS is good for flashing updates to certain BIOSes. Yeah, a lot of people have asked me to do FreeDOS stuff on the channel too. I don't know anything about FreeDOS. You know, I used DOS back in the 80s and 90s, but really, it's not something I want to get into. Like FreeDOS, I don't know. I don't think it would be something that would interest me that much. It seems like a cool project, but probably not something for me. That's more for the people that really long for the days of DOS. You know, there's some people that are very nostalgic about the 80s and those early Microsoft operating systems. I'm not one of those people, though. You know, somebody like Brian Lunduke, I mean, I'm sure he probably loves FreeDOS, you know. He probably has done content about it. I'm not sure. I haven't seen much of Brian's content lately. But he's probably the guy to go to for FreeDOS stuff. Let's see. I'll try to catch up on some other stuff here. I use Arch, by the way, with KDE. Well, that's a respectable choice, the Arch and KDE. I don't hate that. You know, even though I don't use desktop environments, Plasma is not horrible. I actually lived in KDE Plasma for 30 days one time for the channel, because you guys trolled me about it, and it wasn't the worst thing ever. I actually lived in GNOME for about 30 days one time because of you guys. Too. I forgot about the GNOME experiment. The GNOME experiment was pretty bad, but what I did is I hacked GNOME in such a way that it really wasn't GNOME anymore. I basically turned GNOME into a tiling window manager because I refused to use that horrible full screen dash and everything in GNOME. It is just, it's really a horrible interface. Mr. GF, why? Yeah, I'm not either, DT. I was just commenting on a comment. Okay. Yeah, he was just mentioning FreeDOS because of somebody else mentioned it. Yeah. I wasn't insinuating that you are a FreeDOS fanboy, so maybe it came across that way. Trip says he's still using i3 and Debian since Jesse. Yeah, i3 is okay. You know, i3 was probably my least favorite tiling window manager that I've used. I've used a bunch of them. It's not horrible, but I don't know. It just seemed strange. It seemed like it was just hacky and wasn't well put together. It seemed like that thing seemed like that was held together by duct tape. You know, you had to jump through so many hoops to make it work the way you want to make it work. Or things like DWM and XMonad and Qtile, because of the way they're configured and they're written in these programming languages that they're written in. You know, if you know Python, you can make anything happen in Qtile. If you know Haskell, you can make anything happen in XMonad. Adam Toast says, yeah, but i3 is still better than StumpWM. Yeah, StumpWM, I still have nightmares about that time I tried StumpWM. Spectre WM is a really nice one. Yeah, Leviticus is right about that. DT, have you used rat poison? No. People were trolling me about trying rat poison for a while, and I told them I'd never try it because I already know what rat poison is. I know it's going to be horrible. But people were like, well, you know what? Don't try rat poison. Try StumpWM. It's like rat poison, but it's better. It's more modern, and StumpWM was probably just as bad as rat poison. Oh. It was bad. StumpWM. I'm bored with BSPWM trying to hack OpenBox into having tons of shortcut keys like a tiling window manager. It is pretty easy to add a bunch of key bindings to OpenBox and make it kind of function like a tiling window manager. It will never be a true tiling window manager because you're never going to just be able to open windows and they magically go, you know, dynamically in place. You know, you're going to have to decide where those windows go with your key bindings. You know, does it go on the left? Does it go on the right? You know, where in a true tiling window manager, you know, the order that the windows are opened determines where they're placed on the screen. Unfortunately, most floating window managers, they're just not built that way. They can't function that way. Yeah, and Tripcode is still on Debian because he doesn't really have to do reinstalls. Yeah, Debian is very stable. It's old, it's crusty, but it never breaks. It never breaks. I won't say it never breaks. I have broken Debian a few times on servers. Usually doing dumb stuff I shouldn't have. While I'm here, so this is XMonad I am in today. Open up the XMonad config. One thing I've noticed with my Emacs config since doing the distro hop is my org mode. My org mode is asterisks when it really should be bullets. I don't know where the bullets went. If I do org-bullets, org-bullets is not installed. That's a problem. So let's do a package. We're going to do this live. Those of you that are also trying out Doom Emacs and wondering why you have asterisks instead of the circle, you know, the filled dots, the bullets, let's do a package install. Hopefully this will work. Org bullets is the name of the package. Org-bullets. Let's install it. Hopefully it doesn't make the stream buffer installing this. Okay, very quick install. Once we have that installed, if I do meta-x and org-bullets mode. Okay. Hit enter. Ah, there we go. Of course, we don't want to have to do that every time we want the bullets. So in your config, let's see, my Doom Emacs config, which is config.org because it's an org file. I already had it in my config, require org-bullets. We just didn't have that particular package installed though. So that was the problem. Let me open up a terminal and I'll zoom in so you guys can see this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill all Emacs. And the reason I'm killing Emacs is because even though I closed the windows, Emacs is still running because I run the Emacs server. The Emacs daemon is running in the background constantly. So that really killed Emacs. And then what I want to do is I'm going to do it emacs.d/bin/doom. This is the Doom Emacs binaries, and there's several of them in this directory, and the one I want to run is sync. Let's resync the Doom Emacs config. Alright, and now that we've done that, let's launch Emacs again. Let's see if our org mode bullets are actually on by default now instead of the asterisks. They are. You see, we actually have the bullets instead of the asterisks. And I just think those look nicer. I think most people probably would agree that that's just a nicer look. And of course, org mode is so incredibly configurable. You could actually have those bullets be anything you want. You could actually put images there if you wanted to. I mean, Emacs is a GUI, right? It's a graphical program, so you could make your various levels, your heading levels in org mode be whatever you want. Emojis, Unicode characters. All right. So we've got about 300 people watching this unscheduled impromptu live stream. For those that are just getting here, I had no content planned. So I took yesterday off and then I was away from the house all day today. I knew I wasn't going to make any content today. Didn't have anything planned. It takes, a long time to do my pre-recorded stuff and the editing and everything. And then tomorrow I'm going to be recording Unfettered Freedom episode 3, but that's really, or episode 4. We're on the 4th week, but that's really for Thursday. So I was like, well, we're going to have like a 3-day period where you get no content from DT. We can't have that. So I just started the live stream. I'm probably going to go for about an hour. We've been going for about 30 minutes at this point, just so we have something here. But you guys want to talk about XMonad, Emacs, tiling window managers, Linux, life, whatever you guys want to, whatever you want to get into. I'm cool with it. All right. Let's see. I was wondering how long it would take for this stream to turn into an Emacs stream. Yeah. We went a little while. It didn't take that long. Well, no, because the very first thing we talked about was file managers. And I did open Emacs as my file manager. I forgot about that. Yeah, so you got me on that. Yeah, Xmobar isn't that useful outside of XMonad, though. You could use xmobar on some other tiling window managers. Most people don't. It's not that it's not useful. Most people don't even try. It's because you have to install Haskell to use xmobar. Who is going to install, Haskell and the compiler and everything to use xmobar on a tiling window manager when you already have built-in panels to those tiling window managers most of the time anyway? And you don't really need to go grab a third-party panel to use i3 or Awesome or Qtile or DWM. They all have built-in panels. And the ones that don't, Herbstluft, BSPWM, they don't have panels. Most people are just going to go grab Polybar. That seems to be the default. Most people just go and get. Well, thanks for the super chat there from Lewis. Spacemacs versus Doom. Your thoughts? So I have briefly tried out Spacemacs before. And of course, I've been using Doom Emacs for a while. Why did I ultimately choose Doom over Spacemacs? Doom seems to be a little less bloated. Spacemacs seem to have a lot more stuff pre-configured out of the box. Seemed a little slower, just, on my machines. And I don't know, I like Doom because it also has some stuff installed, but it doesn't seem to have as much. And it was very easy to strip stuff away that I didn't want, because just the way Doom Emacs is configured. We're getting into an Emacs stream here. I'm sorry, Mitchell. I know he was complaining about the Emacs stuff, but if I go, there's 3 config files in Doom Emacs, and one of them is, let me do a search. One of them is packages.el, one of them is custom.el, and one of them is config.el, or in my case, config.org, because I converted it to an org mode. If I go to custom.el, this is where custom variables would go. That's where you put all of that stuff. And I'll show you the others as well. Packages.el. This is a list of the packages that you install and you want to be able to use in Doom Emacs. And then the next one, of course, is the config.org, which I've got collapsed here in org mode. Why is that not working? Oh, there we go. All right. Anyway, it's pretty easy to configure this stuff. The real file I was looking for is there is a Doom, is it init.el? Let me open up Dear Ed here and go into the Doom directory, init.el. This is the one. This is really what makes Doom Emacs really easy to use, because you have this list of stuff when you first install Doom Emacs. Most of it is commented out. You see everything that begins with 2 semicolons. Those are things that are commented out. The ones that aren't commented, of course, are the things that are actually being used by Doom Emacs. So, for example, the languages. You have this section, :lang, and then this very lengthy list of various programming languages. All you need to do is uncomment the ones that you want to use inside Emacs. So I uncommented Emacs Lisp, because I'm going to be editing Lisp stuff right inside Emacs, of course, inside Emacs. I also uncommented Haskell plus Dante, because I do some stuff with Haskell, JSON, JavaScript, LaTeX, Lua, Markdown, org, of course, org mode, PHP, Python, and shell scripting, web, and YAML. Now, if I wanted to, I could comment some of this stuff back out if later I decide I don't want to play with Haskell anymore. I'm done with it. I'm swearing off Haskell. Or maybe I want to learn Rust, so I could go in here and I could uncomment Rust, and then I could run a new Doom sync, and it will install the Rust modes, that give you the Rust syntax highlighting and, all the fanciness. Of course, I don't want to do that, so I'll uncomment that for now. Maybe one day I will learn Rust. Anyway, Doom Emacs is pretty easy to get into and configure. It's much easier to configure Doom Emacs than standard GNU Emacs. I can tell you that. Now, I did it. I lived in standard GNU Emacs for about 30 days before moving to Doom Emacs, because I wanted to learn the basics with GNU Emacs and the GNU Emacs key bindings. I wanted to learn those because I thought it was important to at least know the standard key bindings before I went to evil mode The default key bindings, though, the standard GNU Emacs key bindings, even though after a month, I could use them, they really started hurting my hands. And I'm not even kidding. My hands were hurting from using those key bindings, especially the pinky from stretching. And it's just too much. Everything involves the control key. And sometimes multiple control keys, like, you got to do a control C followed by control X followed by control I. And it's like, I'm constantly just reaching with that pinky. And after a month, it's like, man, my hands hurt. Let me go back to the Vim bindings because I don't have to do any of that with the Vim bindings. And in fact, of course, you guys know Richard Stallman, he doesn't program anymore. He hasn't actually done any programming himself in years, many years. It's because his hands were wrecked because of using Emacs. Of course, I don't know if he blames it on Emacs itself, but of course, that's all he's ever used as a text editor is Emacs, and he had some serious hand injuries, and he just can't even type anymore. These days, if he needs to program something, write any kind of code, what he has to do is he has to get a partner, put them in front of the keyboard and tell them basically what to program. All right, got sidetracked there a little bit, but Spacemacs versus Doom Emacs, I'm sure Spacemacs is great. I haven't used it much. Like I've installed it and checked it out. But Doom seemed a little more streamlined, a little less bloated. You wanted to put it in those terms. Why don't you use Cocoon? Well, I've installed Cocoon and have used it a little bit. I don't know if I have it installed on this machine right now. No, I don't have Cocoon installed. Let's see if we can install it really quick. Alright, now we got it installed. Now I could open up something in Cocoon. Let's open up the bash RC. Do I remember how to use Cocoon? Cocoon is a strange beast. I will say Cocoon looks good. Like the colors and the formatting, and when you turn on the line numbers, I love how the line numbers are actually separated with a line, like a dividing line and everything. Cocoon was an interesting text editor. It does follow the Unix philosophy for those that care about that. Do one thing well. It doesn't have splits. It doesn't have tabs. It doesn't have any of that stuff that Vim and Emacs has, right? Of course, Vim and Emacs are much more useful because they have those things. Of course, I guess it depends. If you were using tmux in the terminal, then you just have that handle all your splits and everything. But then again, it's the same thing when people talk about the ST terminal back when it didn't have scroll back installed by default. Now it does. The last time they updated ST, the suckless guys finally put scroll back in ST. But for years, they refused to actually have scrolling in the ST terminal. People were like, well, if you run tmux inside ST, it'll handle the scrolling for you. And it's like, okay, well, you install a third-party program just to have scrolling in your terminal. So it really doesn't make it less bloated because you're still having to install this extra stuff to make it work. The same thing with Cocoon. It's like, you don't need tabs, just use tmux. Well, that's not really solving the bloat situation if you have to go install another program to get your tabs. I think some people take the bloat thing a little too far. I mean, bloat is a real thing, but some people, if you debloat a program, take functions away from it, features away from it that everybody needs, and you force them to go install other programs to get that functionality back, then you really haven't solved any bloat issues, right? Yeah, DT, I spent all of yesterday trying to install Gentoo and ultimately failed. I wonder what the issue was. Gentoo is not terribly difficult to install. It's lengthy. But I would ask, have you ever done any command line installations of other Linux distributions? Things like Arch or any kind of server installs of various distros, I would ask you that. Because for the most part, things are kind of similar in all of them. You know, you got to play with some config files, you know, edit some stuff in Vim or Nano, you know, create your user, install some base packages. In Gentoo's case, you got to compile the kernel at some point. One of the ones that trips people up in some distributions, such as Arch and Gentoo, is grub. You got to make sure that you config grub correctly. Otherwise, when you reboot, you know, nothing's going to happen. Or you'll get the grub prompt. Yeah, somebody was asking about Sabian. Yeah, Yates. Yeah, Sabian is really good. Easy Gentoo. Sabian is not bad. Although, when I had my distro hopping debacle a couple of weeks ago, Sabian was one of the distros I tried to install that crapped out on me. Actually, I had bad luck with Sabian and then Calculate. Yeah, I did Sabian and 2 different versions of Calculate. I tried 3 different Gentoo-based distributions that, for whatever reason, they were not liking my equipment here. Yeah, Pascal. Enjoy your video a lot. Thanks. Longtime Emacs user turned evil recently because of tendinitis. Yeah. Enjoyed figuring out Vim key bindings a lot. Yeah. But the Vim bindings are not that difficult. It's one of those things, if you run through the Vim tutor, you know, it's like 20 minutes. You run through the Vim tutor one time, you kind of got it. For those that are not sure about that, you guys, if you've ever wanted to learn Vim, and I know a lot of you guys watching this stream right now are like, man, one of these days I'm going to learn Vim. Well, what you could do, open up a terminal, and I want you to type Vim tutor, all one word. Hit enter. This is your Vim tutor, and it tells you what you need to do. You see H, J, K, L. It tells you the motion keys. H for left, L for right, K for up, J for down, and you know it tells you that. So now you just start playing with H, J, K, L, and just go down. Oh, lesson 1. What the very first lesson? Exiting Vim. This is the one everybody complains about. Type :Q exclamation point. :Q exclamation point. Ah, okay. Now go back to the Vim tutor and continue the lesson. You know, go back down and just run through each one of these. You know, it takes you about 20, 30 minutes maybe to get through all this. It'll tell you, you know, how to delete and yank and all of that. And once you run through the Vim tutor once, you really will know the basics. Like you can open up a document in Vim and do your standard edits like you would in something like Nano if you were used to Nano. Now, to learn some of the more advanced stuff, once you get into global substitutions and regular expressions, and once you get into macros, you know, things like that, you know, those get a little deeper, but they're not hard either. It's just those may take you a little more time to learn. Vim is pretty straightforward to learn. Vim is a little easier to learn than Emacs, actually. Because Emacs, just because of the nature of Emacs, you know, it does so much more than text editing. And you got a lot more stuff with Emacs you got to learn. And you got a programming language you got to learn. You got to learn eLisp to use Emacs. You really don't have to learn Vim script to use Vim. You really don't even have to configure Vim at all to use Vim. You have to configure Emacs to use Emacs. Yes, buffering. You know, I'm getting a pretty good signal here in OBS. Usually OBS is pretty accurate. You know, they have a little box in OBS that's either green, yellow, or red, depending on how bad the network is. And every time I've looked over at it, it's been showing me a green. So I don't know. Is everybody buffering, or is it just a few people? You guys in the chat, let's get everybody to answer. Buffering, yay or nay? Is it buffering? Yeah, first name, last name says, do you really need to configure Emacs to use it? Yes. Yeah, if you install GNU Emacs, you're not going to use it like the way it is presented to you out of the box. You got to change some stuff immediately. Now, if you install a distribution of Emacs, like Doom Emacs or Spacemacs or something like that, you could use those without having to configure it in any way, but that's because somebody else already configured it for you, right? It didn't. Emacs doesn't look anything like Doom Emacs or Spacemacs out of the box. If you've never seen what a default GNU Emacs looks like, go watch my very first video when I first switched to Emacs. And it's a very hideous looking text editor. And with no plugins installed too. I mean, it's very basic in what it does. Yeah, I'm not buffering for you in the UK. Okay, not buffering. No buffering. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because it looks fine on my end. Usually when the network is bad, OBS will tell me. It'll be obvious. And then I'm also previewing the stream in YouTube. I'm watching the stream with you guys, and it's not buffering with me watching. So, but it's one of those things, you guys that are getting buffering, it could just be your internet connection, you know. So it could be YouTube servers. You never know with these things. But right now it looks like my connection is okay. What you could try to do is try to refresh the stream if you're having a problem. Yo, DT, love the weekly podcast. Any chance you making it into an hour long? I don't want to aim for an hour in length. I want to aim for 30 minutes. And I want to aim for about a half hour. And the reason is I think a half hour is the sweet spot. I think anything longer than an hour for podcasts, it's hard to keep people's attention for longer than an hour. And I know me, if I decided I'm going to make an hour-long podcast, you know, it's going to vary. Some weeks, you know, I may finish the stories very quickly and it'll only be 50 minutes, but some weeks I may ramble on, and that hour-long podcast is really an hour and 20 minutes. You know, and then you're starting to stretch the limits of some people's attention spans when it comes to podcasts. So I'm aiming for 30 minutes, knowing that 30 minutes sometimes could turn into 45 minutes, right? But I still want to keep it under an hour. That's the plan. I know that's not everybody. I know some people want 2-hour podcasts, but really I think those people are definitely the exception and not the rule. I think very few people want to listen to a 2-hour podcast. I think most people are okay with an hour. And everybody's okay with 30 minutes. 30 minutes seems like, hey, it's long enough. You know, it was enjoyable. I wasted a little time here listening to this podcast, but it wasn't so short like it went by like that. You know, I think 15 minutes is too short, right? 30 minutes, you know, you can put it on when you get on the treadmill at the gym, and that's perfect. You know, if I go a little longer some weeks, I go 45 minutes. That really seems like the sweet spot there. So yeah, I considered the length of the podcast when I created it. Yeah. I figure, you know, I do 5 topics on the podcast, and the way I figure is I'm going to average about 5 or 6 minutes on the topics, each topic, which gets me to about the 25 to 30 minute mark, you know. Occasionally there'll be that one hot topic, though. I know I'm going to ramble on for 10 or 15 minutes on just that one topic. You know, and that'll be the podcast that maybe stretch out to that 45-minute length. That's okay. Hey DT, any plans for a kernel tweaking video? Yeah, I haven't planned on anything like that. No, I haven't thought about it. For me personally, I always just do the big kernel, the generic kernel. People have asked, hey, could you do a video on compiling the kernel? We could do something like that at some point. Hey, DT, I know you love both Qtile. Well, I missed the, gotta catch up with it. In just a second. I had a question about Qtile, and then I lost it. Yeah, the chat skipped ahead here. Give me just a second, guys. Yeah, I don't know. The message went away. Anyway, it was about Qtile. Qtile's great, if that was the question. Yeah, Owen says it was his post over on the r/Linux subreddit about HBO Max not working on Linux, and that I talked about it in Unfettered Freedom. That's right. That was a really good story as far as... I think it really highlights one of the problems with video streaming services, all of them. It's the DRM aspect of it. And of course, that gets into why somebody like HBO decides to drop support for Linux. Ultimately, it comes down to this. Stallman was right. Stallman was right. ADT, I know you love both Qtile and XMonad, but tend to use XMonad more. Is there any reason for using XMonad more? Well, I use XMonad more right now. I've used Qtile a lot, too. I could log into Qtile and live in it the next 6 months without logging into anything else if I wanted to. And I actually, you guys see XMonad on this video. But not all the videos I do, I show my desktop, because sometimes I'm just speaking to you guys. You guys never see what I logged into. I'm in Qtile all the time, though. I log into Qtile pretty often on my machine here. And I typically log into Qtile or XMonad when I'm going to show off my desktop, not because I can't log into Awesome or DWM or i3. It's just I've configured XMonad and Qtile for all my OBS scenes. Like, I know when I log into those, anything, and I've got a whole bunch of scenes in OBS, and I know I've got key bindings for them all in XMonad and Qtile. DT, what do you think of Gentoo and Portage? Gentoo is a fine distribution, and Portage is a fine package manager. Yeah, I mean, I could run Gentoo and be happy with it. I don't like compiling, mainly just for sake of time. I don't need to compile my software, and it's a time waster for me. I have such little time. I'm trying to make videos, and these things take hours, and really minutes matter for me. Like any time I can save, no matter how insignificant, is precious time, and I don't want to have my computer tied up compiling software, for every update. Yes. So I'm going to run a binary distro on my main production machine. But you guys that, hey, like seeing stuff flashing by on the screen as it builds on your system, some people just love all that text in the terminal, and it makes me feel like a hacker. Hey, go for it. Go for it. Unfortunately, I have to, do stuff on this computer sometimes, so I can't have ridiculously long updates. How long would a kernel take to compile on your 24-core Threadripper? I have the 12-core Threadripper, 24 threads, but yeah. The kernel would probably compile in, I don't know, if I was going to take a guess, 10, 15 minutes probably. It wouldn't be terribly long. That's just a guess, though. I haven't timed it. I haven't done one on it. But I'm less concerned with like installing Gentoo, because that's a one-time thing. It's not. I can install Gentoo, and if I spend 3-4 hours installing Gentoo, that's no big deal. I'm talking about after you get it installed. Every time you update, you got to compile stuff, right? It's got to build all these packages. Some of the updates in Gentoo take a lot longer than they do like on binary-based distros like Arch and Debian and Ubuntu, Fedora. And again, it's wasted time for me, because I don't care about it compiling that stuff. I'm not going in and playing with the use flags and tinkering with all that stuff. I don't care about any of that stuff. I want pre-built binaries and I want all the flags. That's all about just saving me time. Hey DT, what do you think of Unix porn giving false hope to new people getting into Linux? I've heard a lot of people say it can be demotivating. Huh. Why is Unix porn giving people false hope? I don't understand that one. Because Unix porn is just showing people screenshots. How is that giving them false hope? What? You're afraid that new Linux users are going to see those screenshots and they can't make screenshots like that themselves? I'm not sure. I actually think Unix porn probably is responsible for a large percentage of people that come to Linux. Not a large, but there's a significant number of people that probably switch to Linux because they see those Unix porn screenshots or, similar screenshots on other social media. When you see some of those really sexy desktops using like the awesome window manager, those gorgeous awesome window manager screenshots. Hell yeah, if I was running Windows, I'd want to be on Linux. Yeah, and then you install awesome and realize you have to configure the rc.lua file and you have no idea what the hell Lua even is. That can be a problem, but hey, you just learn it, right? That's just part of the journey. Yeah, Blackworm, appreciate that super chat there, buddy. He says, if a streaming service decides to drop Linux support, they're probably trying to hide something behind encryption. So they're up to no good and you shouldn't be supporting them anyway. Well, they're all hiding stuff. I mean, it's all proprietary, right? I don't think them dropping Linux support had anything to do with them just hiding anything. It's just they have to use certain technologies with their streaming service that are not compatible with Linux. And we don't matter enough for them to care. So, hey DT, what do you think of GNOME? I'm going to skip that one because that seems like that could get me in trouble. You want to know my thoughts on GNOME? You can find some recent videos of me talking about what I think of the GNOME Foundation, the GNOME project. I think they have some rather poor leadership. I'll just leave it at that. Hey DT, do you have stutter when resizing Windows and Qtel? And Qtel works just fine for me resizing everything. Yeah, I have no issues with Qtel at all as far as performance or anything like that. I don't know. What I would suggest is make sure that it's not something that's just happening in Qtel for you. So many of these other tiling window managers install in seconds. Install, Awesome or DWM or something really quickly, log into those, and then play with resizing those windows, see if you also have the same problem. It could be something to do with the compositor, your graphics driver. There probably doesn't have much to do with the window manager itself, but you're going to have to experiment a little bit and see if you can narrow down the issue. If you do install some other window managers and start resizing those, and they seem to be acting right, then it may be something with Qtel. Maybe some weird stuff in your code. Yeah, but you have a beast of a machine. No wonder you have no struggle with Qtel. Well, I put Qtel on everything, though. Those laptops behind me are potatoes. I run Qtel on them. Like, I install Qtel and XMonad on everything. My previous production machine was nowhere near this machine. I ran Qtel on it for years. I probably had that particular computer 5-6 years. Had Qtel on it the whole time. You guys saw me living in Qtel for much of that period of the channel. So, you don't need a beast of a machine to run Qtel. That machine behind me has an AMD A8 processor. Qtel runs just fine on it. I mean, everything is slow on that machine, but that's not a Qtel problem. That's just that machine is old and it's a lesser piece of equipment there. But Qtile doesn't run any slower than anything else on that machine. Yeah, it's probably not the window manager because window managers are simple. They actually don't do too much. Yeah, for something like stuttering, weird things happening when you're moving windows, resizing windows, that's much more to do with probably the compositor or a video driver issue, maybe. Settings and some of that. Hey, DT, ever thought about resurrecting the PSA series and doing one from the terminal? Do not be afraid of the terminal. I like that idea there, Eris. Do not be afraid of the terminal. I'm going to write that one down. Let me open up Emacs. I'm going to make a note. I got a file somewhere in here for me leaving notes for myself. Let me copy that from Eris there. I wrote it down, Eris. I don't know if I'll get to it soon, or heck, I don't know if I'll ever get to it, but I wrote it down just in case. I like the idea, though. Not a bad idea. And I haven't made one of those public service announcement kind of videos in a while. Those are fun. Those are tough to make, though. Those PSA kind of videos that I make sometimes, those things, even though they'll often be 4, maybe 5 minutes in length, and those things can take 6 hours for me to, clip everything together and add the music, and if I got to add any text or, any kind of effects, usually don't get too fancy with them, but even the little bit I do with them, it's a lengthy process to make those things, but they're fun. I do enjoy doing that. Yeah, Tripcode is posting from his potato. It's a 1.2 gigahertz Core 2 Duo. Yeah, everybody loves the Core 2 Duo, though. Hey, DT, do you watch Brian Lunduke? Sometimes I catch some of his stuff. Problem is, I don't have a lot of free time, so I don't watch much Linux content as far as Linux YouTubers, because if I have time to sit at this computer and watch somebody else for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, I probably should be making content of my own during that time. Or if I've already made my content that day, I've done what I needed to get done, I'm not going to be sitting at this computer, right? I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go do other stuff. I can't, I spend so much time here, doing all of this. As soon as I can get away, I get away. So I don't just sit here and watch YouTube. I definitely don't watch Linux content on YouTube. So it's rare, I definitely can't follow people on a regular basis. So have I ever tried the Sway window manager? No, but I've tried i3. Sway's a clone of it. Sway just uses Wayland instead of X. I can't use Wayland, though, because, I do stuff on this computer. I make videos. Wayland, I can't use Wayland. Nobody can use Wayland for what I do. If you record your desktop, you can't use Wayland, right? If you do any kind of video stuff, Wayland's not ready. So that's not to say you guys that are using Sway and Wayland and everything's working for you, hey, that's great. You guys have some very basic needs, though, right? You're not recording. All right, I had a super chat there I missed for a second from Zoltar. It says, hey, DT, love your videos. Have a nice beer. I tell you what, I don't have any beer here, but when I'm done here, I do have to go out. I'm going to pick up one. And you know what? I'm going to pick up 2. One for me and one for you. I'm going to drink yours too, though. I'm going to drink mine and yours. Chris Kelling, how you doing, sir? He says, did you make your theme music or pick it off a royalty-free library? Chris, are you talking about the intro song to the podcast, Unfettered Freedom? If so, that song I got from the YouTube audio library. Actually, anything you're asking about music-wise on the channel, no, I didn't create any of it. But that particular song, if that's the one you're talking about, people have asked about it. Because it is a catchy theme. I actually found that in the audio library for YouTube. Hey DT, probably answered this in some video, but what software do you use for video editing? I tried Kdenlive last night, but have too many issues with it. I use Kdenlive. I've done some videos on Kdenlive. Kdenlive, yeah, it can be buggy. Kdenlive is probably the best free and open source video editor out there. I'm not even close to being, nothing else comes close to it. As far as free and open source software, unfortunately, the one downside with Kdenlive is sometimes you get updates to it and they can be kind of buggy. They can be crashy. The other downside to Kdenlive is video playback. You know, when you're going through the timeline, video playback is horrible. It doesn't matter. You have a beast of a machine. I have a Threadripper. Playback will be stuttery. It'll be unwatchable. So if you use Kdenlive, you do have to enable proxy clips. So that's the one thing that every time I do anything with Kdenlive, I try to tell you guys that are trying Kdenlive. Let me launch it and I will show you guys what I'm talking about. So Kdenlive, when you import stuff and you're playing on the timelines, a lot of times it's choppy, it's slow, nothing's in sync, and it's just horrible. What you need to do is go into settings, go into configure Kdenlive, go into proxy clips. Make sure that is ticked on. It's not ticked on by default. Tick that on, and then tick on the next two things about generating videos larger than and whatever size. I think I just left it as the default. Generate for images larger than, and same thing, I just left it as is. And what this does is now when you import a bunch of videos and images in your project bin here, Kdenlive creates proxies of them, proxy clips, and these are smaller versions of those videos. So I record everything in 1080p, 60 frames per second, in OBS, but when I import them into Kdenlive, it creates these proxy clips that are only about 480p. They're downscaled, the resolution, so they don't look great, but they play buttery smooth in the playback window. And the main thing is just having the playback be smooth and you seeing the playback. It doesn't have to look that good. I mean, you don't need it in high def. You really needed it in high def, what you could do is you could always take out certain sections. Like Kdenlive does have the ability to render a section of a video. Like I could go in here and I could clip, from here to here, like 10 seconds of video, and I could go to render. And instead of rendering the full project, I could tick this selected zone and it will just render that one section that I, picked out. Render those 10 seconds of video and you could watch that, in high def. But really, yeah, everybody should just use the proxy clips. It's not a perfect solution. I don't know why Kdenlive still hasn't fixed that playback issue, because that's probably the #1 critique people have of Kdenlive. If they had playback working the way it does in pretty much every other video editor, I think everybody would use Kdenlive as far as free and open source editors. That's probably the #1 thing that makes people go search for other editors is when they see the playback in Kdenlive out of the box. They're like, man, that thing's horrible. I got a Threadripper and it's still bad. Yeah, Big Pod. Yeah, you need the proxy clips because unless you transcode them, yeah, it's going to be laggy. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of work on your CPU, That's the problem. Yeah, Bridmoss says he likes ZFS. Yeah, well, ZFS is a fine file system. I haven't played with ZFS too much. I typically stick with Extend 4. When I find something that works, I just stick with it. I know people are like, man, you gotta take a look at Btrfs and ZFS. I mean, I've installed Btrfs and ZFS before. Some distros install them by default, and typically if they do, yeah, I'll go with it. But if I'm doing a command line install and I got to pick my file system, I always pick Extend4 just because it's tried and it's proven. I know my file system is not just going to crap out one day and I'm going to lose all my data, which maybe Btrfs has gotten better in recent years. I know when Btrfs became the default, was it in SUSE that made Btrfs like their default file system? And this was several years back when it was still really kind of beta software. There were some horror stories with people trying Btrfs back then. ADT, will Arch serve well a 76-year-old man that only does web browsing and email? Yeah, I mean, Arch does web browsing and email. So, does that 76-year-old man want to install Arch? Does he actually care to go through the command line installer? If he doesn't, then there's no reason for him to install Arch if he's not interested in that. Because every Linux distribution is going to have a web browser and an email client. So, it's kind of a weird question. Because I can't think of any Linux distribution, desktop Linux distribution, that doesn't have a web browser and an email client. Or at least the ability to get them installed within a couple of minutes. Yeah, personal fan of ZSH, but there are some die-hard Fish fans out there. Yeah, I like Fish. I like ZSH. These days, I just stick with Bash, though. Even though I think I've got all three installed on this system. I know I had all three installed before the distro hop. And they're all fine shells, but, you know, Bash is the standard. Let me double check that. I know this is the Bash shell. This is my default shell. And if I type ZSH, that is ZSH. I'm getting some errors. It doesn't like my ZSHRC because that was pulled down from my GitLab. And it's looking for some packages, probably some OhmyZSH stuff that I didn't install yet. But ZSH is here. This is the ZSH shell. If I type fish, yep, that's the fish shell. Just a default fish shell. So that's not OhmyFish, nothing fancy, just a plain Jane fish. And there's Bash again. So I do have all three. But I haven't taken the time to get ZSH looking like it used to look. And I haven't installed the OhmyFish plugin system either. I need to get that installed so my fish shell looks sexy. Right now it's looking rather bland. Chris Kelling again. He's, would you use Arch for server, or is it tuned more for the desktop? Well, probably most people wouldn't use Arch for a server. Would I? I would in some circumstances. I have run into situations where I was installing stuff on a web server, and I wanted to use, you know, some latest and greatest piece of software, you know, some content management system or something, and, you know, the latest version's not available on Debian Stable because that thing is as old as the Tyrannosaurus in Jurassic Park, right? So sometimes it's nice to have the freshest, latest, greatest packages. And you never have to worry about that with Arch. The only thing you have to worry about with Arch are the updates, right? You on a server, you worry about the updates eventually breaking something. But I don't know, if you're comfortable managing an Arch system like I am, obviously I live in Arch, you know, I run Arch all the time. I don't see the problem in that. If you're not familiar with Arch and the way it works, then I would be hesitant. Yeah, Blackworm, appreciate the super chat. Ever tried the Linux2 browser? It is a dream. I've tried all of those terminal-based web browsers in the past. I've tried Lynx with an I, Linux2 with an I, eLinks. Yeah, I've played around a little bit in all of them. The reason I use Lynx with a Y is because it's the only one I'm aware of that still has the Gopher protocol enabled in it. You know, I can actually view Gopher pages in Linux with a Y. Because Linux with a Y is so old, it was created in the early 90s. I think 91 or 92 was when the Linux browser was started. It's been in active development ever since. It's crazy how long. It's the longest actively developed web browser, actually, Linux is. And because when it was created, the Gopher protocol was a real thing, you know, it's always had support for Gopher. But there's nothing wrong with Linux with an I and Linux 2. W3M is another one I know a lot of people use. All right, guys, I'm going to kill the stream. We'll make this stream an hour and a half. We've been going about 75 minutes, so another 15 minutes or so. So get your questions and comments in here. Lewis says, when you going to try Gentoo? That surely isn't for me. He must have been talking to somebody else. I've tried Gentoo. I've been using Linux for a long time. There's very few Linux distributions I haven't tried. So, let's see. I tried SID once. Install wasn't my main. Lasted 3 months. So Tripcode. He tried Debian SID. I'm assuming Tripcode, you're running Debian stable. That's what you're doing now. Debian SID is interesting because, you know, it's rolling release. It's very bleeding edge. And the problem with that for Debian is so few people run Debian unstable. Like they have this rolling release branch, but so few people use it. And it's kind of like you're on your own, right? You install this testing branch and the unstable branch and things break. You know, you really can't just go ask anybody about it. I mean, the Debian community is huge, but like 99% of the people that run Debian, they're running Debian stable. Yeah, and Trip, yeah, he's running stable with a few testing packages. Okay. And what about Bodhi? Bodhi Linux is interesting. I've tried it. It's nice, minimal, fast. I like Enlightenment, or now they forked Enlightenment and made the Moksha desktop environment. It's nice. It looks good. You know. See, DT, you should do another live XMonad tweaking soon. That's not a bad idea either. Hey DT, do you have any tips for new Linux YouTubers? Yeah, that's such a broad question, though. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to even start with that. That's such a. I guess the first thing you're going to do Linux content. So, I don't know. I have to think about that. The main thing is. It doesn't even matter what kind of content you make. Some tips for getting started with YouTube. At first, the hard part is just being consistent, meaning making consistent content, releasing content on a consistent level as far as, you know, can you make a video a week or 2 videos a week or whatever it is, you know, depending on what you got going on with work or school or life. You know, figure out what you can put out. If you can do one a week, I would at least try to do at least one a week and do that consistently for a few months. That's the hard part. Before you even worry about the rest of it, you know, cameras and audio and lighting and, you know, everything, you know, there's a ton of work involved. But until you can figure out that you can consistently put out content, there's no point into even getting into the rest of it. Because if you can't make content consistently, it's just not going to happen for you. Now, most people can't do that. But say you're one of those people that can make consistent content. You can put out regular content. Then of course, you've are already ahead of 95% of the people that started YouTube channels. Now, once you get to that point, then I would start worrying about audio, is usually the first thing people tell you, new YouTubers when you start thinking about equipment and, fixing things, is work on your audio first. If your audio's bad, nobody's going to watch your videos. Nobody. If I can't understand you, or if it's staticky, it's all noise and hiss, or sometimes the levels are so low that even with the speakers turned all the way up, I still can't hear what you're saying, I'm just going to go watch another video. So, then once you get audio worked out, maybe work on, the camera quality, You got some really crappy webcam, maybe up it to a better webcam. The ones most people go to are the Logitech 920 series. Logitech makes the 920 and the 922. They're really good webcams. They're only about $100 or so. Not terribly expensive, good quality webcams. If you eventually want to up your game to a DSLR camera or a mirrorless camera, you can get some of those for $200 to $300 range that are really nice quality cameras. Kind of like what you're seeing here, this camera here. I paid $500 for this Panasonic Lumix G7. It's a little more expensive, but you can find stuff in the $200 to $300 range that are pretty decent quality cameras. The expensive stuff is not the camera, though. The expensive stuff is the lens on these cameras. There are lenses out there that you can spend, $2,000, $3,000 on. Now, that's crazy money. The lens I'm using, though, that's a $200 lens. So really, the camera's $500. The lens is $200. Now, the bigger YouTubers, the people that got millions of subscribers, you guys have seen Linus Tech Tips and Mark S. Brownlee and, all of those guys. Those guys are, the cameras they run are like $60,000 cameras. It's insane how much money they spend on equipment. Of course, those guys are almost like actual film studios, like making Hollywood kind of. They're recording in 4K. Actually, they're recording in 8K. Yeah. Heck, pretty soon we got to get ready for 16K. But Marcus Brownlee, man, if you've ever seen his studio, like he sometimes will do videos, kind of like people ask me or other YouTubers, hey, show off your equipment, show off your gear. And every now and then, once, twice a year, you'll tell everybody your equipment for new subscribers because you get so many new subscribers. And when you see Marcus Brownlee show off his studio, he's got like two $60,000 cameras. Not just one. He's got two of them because he needed a second one. He's got like these automated robotic arms that control the cameras, and it's just mind-blowing. He's probably got $250,000 worth of equipment in his studio that he records in. And then he does everything on a Mac. He uses a Mac Pro, and he's got a Mac Pro that has 768 gigs of RAM. He probably has $15,000 tied up in this Mac Pro. Probably came that way from the Apple guys. They probably just configured it that way on their website, but I think he maxed out the RAM and Kami says, I thought the lens just mattered for zooming in. Well, depending on the lens, it matters as far as where the camera placement is. Depending on what lens I put on that camera, the closer or the further away I need to put that camera for me to be in the frame where I want to be. Also, depending on the lens you use, the more that background effect, the bokeh effect you can get in the background, where it's kind of blurred. Let me switch to this scene here, where I'm focused, but everything behind me is blurred. I see the mixer behind me. It's kind of blurred, but if the room was a little deeper, you'd really see that effect. You can see the light here on this speaker. Kind of has that bokeh effect going. Now, depending on what kind of lens you put on these cameras, you get more or less of that effect. So yeah, the lens matters a lot. There's some big differences. Some big differences in price. You can find lenses for $50 that look really good, and then you can find some lenses that are, like I said, $2,000 that I'm sure look really good too. People that get really into photography, and they're like, that's all they do is photography. They've got cameras and lenses and walls, drawers full of various lenses, and they've got so much money tied up just in the glass, just in those lenses. Hey DT, what do you think about Dragonfly BSD? I have tried Dragonfly BSD. I can't remember if I did anything on the channel with it though. I've made so many videos. Might check the back catalog for my channel. I can't remember if I actually did anything with Dragonfly on camera. I have downloaded the ISO and installed it and played with it before. I haven't done enough with it, to make any real judgments. It seems like a nice BSD though. Nice BSD operating system. When people ask me about BSD though, it's weird because I can't use BSD on my main production machine and do everything, Like some people ask me about BSD, like, well, we're gonna find that magical BSD I'm gonna install, and I can do everything I want to do. And it's that, unfortunately, that's not the case. Unfortunately, I'll tell you a little secret here. When it comes to serious audio and video production, Linux pales in comparison to Windows. Yeah, I just said that. Most people that are serious about audio and video, they don't run Linux. Almost nobody runs Linux for that, right? They all run Windows or Mac. Many, well, I will say this. We go back 10 years ago. Linux podcasts, people that did audio Linux podcasts. Almost every single one of those Linux podcasts, those guys were doing all of their production and editing and everything on either Windows or Macs. All of them. 10 years ago, any Linux podcast, they wouldn't tell you that because it sounds kind of scandalous, right? I'm doing a Linux podcast, but hey, you know what? I produced all of this on a Mac. But that's what most were doing. 5 years ago, that's still what a lot of them were doing, but the audio situation was getting a little better. The sound server was getting a little better. Pulse Audio and Jack, they're starting to get straightened out a little more than they were 10 years ago. We're getting better tools, even the proprietary tools, proprietary DAWs, Bitwig and Reaper and all that stuff. People could use that. So people gradually got away from using Windows and Mac in favor of Linux for doing some of their audio stuff. Video is still an issue, though. Not for simple stuff. The stuff I do, Linux is fine. If I wanted to do something a little more cinematic, right? Something that really involved some fancy editing and camera work. I needed some other software that's not available on Linux, or some of the software that is available on Linux, like the really good video editors. DaVinci Resolve and Lightworks, they're professional grade video editors. They have Linux versions. The Linux versions suck compared to the Windows versions, right? DaVinci Resolve is still not great on Linux. Depending on what video cards you've got and what distribution you're running, compared to how buttery smooth and how everything just magically works in DaVinci Resolve on a Mac, for example. So there's such a big difference between Windows and Mac and Linux when it comes to audio and video. Now, I can make some sacrifices because I have some more basic needs. If I had other needs, I would have to run Windows and Mac to do all this. Now, getting back to the BSD thing, there's such a big difference between Windows and Linux doing all this audio video production. The difference between Linux and BSD is even more drastic. Like I couldn't do this on BSD. It's just not possible. I know some people want that to be the case, but it's not. And we know it's not because nobody's doing it. And if it was possible, somebody would be making serious, theatrical video stuff, and they'd be doing it all on FreeBSD, and they'd be telling the world about it. But nobody's doing that because it's not possible. And I'm talking about FreeBSD. And we know it's definitely not possible on things like NetBSD and OpenBSD. You know, those are server operating systems. And they're not even trying to get all of this kind of stuff to work on those operating systems. So, unfortunately, you know, I'm a Linux guy, so I'm going to run Linux. And I'm going to run Linux distributions I know stuff works in. So, Arch and Debian, right? Or distributions based on Arch or Debian. That's where I'm at. That's where I've got to be these days on this machine, on my main production machine. Went on a little bit of a rant there. So getting to the end of an hour and a half, so I'm going to be shutting this down in just a second. All right, yeah, did somebody say DaVinci Resolve? Yeah. How you doing, Rocco, guys? You don't know Rocco and Big Daddy Linux? Be sure to check out Big Daddy Linux over on YouTube. And on Library. I'm pretty sure he has a Library channel too. Now, I'm assuming Rocco is a DaVinci Resolve user, since he was mentioning it, yeah. Yeah, Nakami said, yeah, Resolve didn't work for me on Linux. Maybe it works on something Debian-based. Maybe, I don't know. A lot of people complain about DaVinci Resolve. You know, that software, though, ultimately, I mean, it was designed to work on Windows and Mac. They've ported it to Linux, but yeah, it's not a first-class citizen, right? So, yeah, Chocolate Pug, yeah, I made DT rant, yeah, you got me on that. But it's something that needed to be said, you know. I mean, if we're being honest, there is a difference in some areas between Windows and Linux. And then, you know, the people that are talking about BSD stuff, they got to understand there's a big difference between Linux and BSD. Like, you know, not all operating systems are equal, right, in every department. All right, well, guys, I am going to go ahead and get out of here. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me on this unscheduled impromptu stream. I'm surprised I get about 300 people still here after about 90 minutes, and appreciate you guys with the questions and comments, because honestly, we wouldn't have had a show without you guys. You guys had some pretty cool questions this time, too. Sometimes you guys have some really off-the-wall, asinine questions, but today, you guys, you came with the hard-hitting questions. I appreciate that. Before I go, I have to thank a few people, though. I need to thank the producers of the show. I need to thank all of these guys. These names you're seeing on the screen. Also want to thank each and every one of these ladies and gentlemen on this list here. These are all my supporters over on Patreon, because this channel is, of course, supported by you guys, the community. You want to support my work, you'll find DT over on Patreon. All right, guys. Peace.